Hello and welcome to the Political Opinions podcast, where every opinion is given equal footing and political tolerance and debate are given their proper attention in a world where both are on the decline. Today's episode will cover the different opinions regarding reforming the first-past-the-post system currently used in the UK for general elections. First-past-the-post is a plurality system, meaning the winner only needs to get more votes than any other candidate. This often results in the winning member receiving less than 50% of the vote, and no winning party in the UK has won with a majority of the vote since before World War II. This, among other reasons, has led some to claim that the system should be reformed. There are still those, however, who defend the system and argue it shouldn't be changed. I will not be arguing for a specific alternative to first-past-the-post, but rather the general reasons first-past-the-post is good and first-past-the-post is bad. A quick reminder that the aim of this episode will not be to try and argue for or against electoral reform, but rather to highlight the different opinions around it and provide a comparison between them. I will begin with the arguments that first-past-the-post is bad, followed by the arguments that it is good, with a comparison at the end. One of the main problems with first-past-the-post is that it disproportionately benefits the winning party. Often, there is a very small difference between the Conservatives and Labour at a general election, say 5 to 10%. However, the difference in votes could be as much as twice as many for the winning party. This is a big problem with first-past-the-post, as it benefits the winning party massively and results in the outcome of an election regarding the number of seats a party wins not reflecting the percentage of the vote they got. Furthermore, given that first-past-the-post is a plurality system, most of the time, winners of an election do not have more than 50% of the vote. This is harmful for democracy, as it means that tyranny of the minority can exist at a national level. An MP who is only supported by 40% of a constituency represents all of the constituency, and on a national level, this can result, given the way the current UK political system works with elective dictatorship, a government that has only received a vote of, say, 40% of the population could be running the country for everyone, with no possibility of the 60% who didn't vote having their views represented to the same degree. This is not only unlegitimate for democracy, but it also means that representation is greatly reduced. Other systems can often ensure either that candidates get more than 50% of the vote, or a proportional system would allow for more than one representative and ensure that those majority of votes that didn't win in aggregate are not purely disregarded. Furthermore, first-past-the-post on pretty much all levels is unproportionate. For example, the SNP for the last 3 elections has won far more seats than the Lib Dems, and yet at a few of them the Lib Dems have actually gotten more votes. This is because concentrated voting wins in first-past-the-post. The SNP support is concentrated to a very small area in Scotland, particularly in core constituencies which they often win. However, the Lib Dem support is spread evenly across the entire country. This means that although the Lib Dems may get 15% of the vote in every constituency in the UK, as an example, and the SNP gets 0 in every single constituency in England, the SNP will win far more seats given that their votes are concentrated in Scotland, while the Lib Dems will win very few, given that they are often beaten by the bigger parties. Furthermore, this problem reinforces the two-party system. Labour and the Conservatives have a decent amount of support in essentially every constituency, especially regarding safe seats, and that means that they are often going to disproportionately win more votes than smaller parties. And as such, first-past-the-post ensures that only the Conservatives and Labour will ever have enough votes to have the possibility of forming the government and the opposition, and doesn't allow smaller parties in. This is another problem, as smaller parties are unable to actually enter politics. Think about the number of small parties currently in the UK electoral democratic system. You have the Greens, and that's basically it. Other than the big four of the Lib Dems, the SNP, the Conservatives and Labour, no other party really wins votes. Obviously you have smaller parties in Wales and Ireland, but again, those are very localised. You have no nationwide party that does well. Best example in case is UKIP and then the Brexit Party. although less so with the Brexit Party, but UKIP often wins considerable portions of the votes, or at least they used to, but they never won many, or any in some cases, seats, simply because they did not have enough votes in a specific area. This can in turn discourage voters from actually going out to vote in the first place, most often in safe seats where it's a major issue. What is the incentive to go and vote if you know that your party won't win? You know that even if you go and vote, even if 10% of the population goes and votes for one specific party, that party is never going to have any chance of getting anywhere. And as such, a lot of people don't vote and are disenfranchised through first past the post. This often results in tactical voting, which some view as a negative, which is essentially whereby voters vote for a candidate not because they like that candidate, but because they don't want a different candidate getting in. This at times goes against the whole meaning of democracy, as the person you are voting for, out of no fault of your own or no choice of your own, is not someone that you support, and often can result in voters only half-heartedly supporting people they actually vote for. Finally, on a counterpoint to the idea that first past the post produces strong governments, they would point, at least opponents of first past the post, can simply point to 2017, where the Conservatives failed to win a majority, and 2010 as well, as an example of where first past the post doesn't produce a strong government, and has many costs as listed above. Regarding the idea that first past the post is good, however, there are a few. Firstly, it allows and often creates strong governments. The fact that it benefits the winner means that often the government and the party that wins has a strong or good enough majority. This means that the party in power is able to act decisively and doesn't have to rely on other parties. They would point often to the unstable nature of coalitions found in many other countries. All you have to do is look at, say, Weimar Germany to see a continuation of unstable politics, given that coalitions constantly collapsed as parties disagreed. However, with one party and a strong majority, they don't have to compromise and change their views to fit with others, and it means that they can act decisively and get more done, and also, if they are bad, they can simply be replaced at the next election. Another benefit of first past the post is that it creates a strong constituent and member of parliament link. All voters are still represented by their MP, and although you may not have voted for them at the election, you are still able to go to them with worries and complaints. And, given that there is a very clear and single person who represents your constituency, it creates a close and personal link between voters and their representative, and allows a more personal relationship, and is often viewed by some as the best means of representative democracy. It also provides a clear-cut choice for voters at the ballot, and prevents ballots from becoming full of many different and conflicting parties. Often, voters will agree with many of the ideas of Labour and the Conservatives, especially when they are in a more centralised state, essentially the 21st century, ignoring Jeremy Corbyn. Most times, both parties have at least had some policies to attract the vast majority of voters, and having a strong two-party system provides a clear-cut choice for voters. And in areas where other parties are stronger, again, it provides this very easy and simple choice, and means that voters don't have to spend time, which they probably won't do to begin with, sorting through many different parties with greatly conflicting policies, when instead they have the few major parties with very clear policies, and it makes it a lot easier and prevents voters from voting irrationally and just randomly picking one, which they may or may not actually agree with. It also keeps radical fringe parties well away from politics. Again, looking at Weimar Germany, there were vast numbers of extremist parties who actually opposed democracy. However, given the nature of proportional representation and the fact that there were members in Germany who opposed Weimar, they were constantly able to be elected into the Reichstag. However, in the UK, there has not been an example of an extremist fringe party. Although some may disagree, the fact is that most of the parties currently are more toned down, more catch-all, or in some cases specific issue, but with a wider specific issue such as Scottish independence, which is a wider issue for all Scottish people. And as such, first past the post keeps extremist parties away from politics. A two-party system also allows for a strong opposition. The opposition party, although being smaller than the government, is usually substantially larger than any other opposition party, and as such, It means that the opposition to the government can function more effectively than, say, 10 smaller opposition parties all trying to combine together to criticise the government. Having a very clear leader of the opposition, as the leader of currently the Labour Party, or if Labour in government, the leader of the Conservatives, and having a very clear opposition party, it means that the system of checks and balances to some can operate more effectively. And finally, it allows voters to choose an individual and not just a party, unlike many proportional systems, whereby it's a list system, so you vote for a party, then they choose the representatives. However, in certain cases, you may support a party but despise their local representative, and through first past the post, it means you can balance your decision for the individual who will represent you and for the party which they will be a member of. Moving on now to the comparison. On the idea of a strong government, those opposing first past the post would point to examples where this doesn't always result in a strong government, mainly 2010 and 2017, when there's more division in politics and it's less simply Labour or Conservative. It can often result in the opposition in the government not being in a strong position, which negates the main benefit of first past the post. And a strong government, they argue, can be a bad thing, especially if they oppose the government's policies. The fact that they are disproportionately benefited from winning means that often they cannot be stopped until the next election. However, those on the other side would say that first past the post, most of the time, does produce a strong government that can work effectively and that can get things done. And they would argue that even if they're bad things, they can be replaced. However, it's better to have bad things and replace them with a government who's more likely to do good things and able to operate effectively than, say, look at the US, where it's very stagnant and very little changes because neither party can effectively operate against the other. On the idea of proportionality of results, those opposing first past the post would point to the fact that first past the post disproportionately benefits the largest parties and parties that are extremely concentrated in specific areas. This is bad and this is undemocratic, given that often parties receive less than 50% of the vote, and also means that there is not a clear reflection of the voting composition of the UK and the UK Parliament. However, those on the other side would say that concentrated parties allows local and strong support to be represented in government and allows the biggest parties to win when they should. If a party is much bigger and much more widely supported, even if they may not have the majority of the vote, it's better to elect them than it is to elect a smaller party and lots of fringe parties, essentially. And they would also point to other benefits of first past the post. Regarding the two-party system, those opposing first past the post generally consider this system bad, as there is often less choice. If you don't like the Conservatives or Labour, you're often in a very tough position, unless you're in a place such as Scotland or areas in Wales and Ireland and other areas where smaller parties are very concentrated. It means you're likely not going to be represented, and also means that the two-party system constrains the voices in Parliament to just those of Labour and Conservative, which, again, if you don't agree with, is a bad thing. However, those on the other side would say that two-party systems are good. It produces not only a strong government, but in the vast majority of the time, it produces a strong opposition, which means that the government can operate effectively, checks and balances from the opposition can work effectively, and most parties are catch-all, at least the Labour and Conservative are catch-all parties most of the time, and that means that at least some people will be represented through different areas of their views. Regarding the idea of having less candidates, those opposing first past the post would say that it results in voters having to tactically vote rather than voting for their preferred option, meaning again they're not being represented and at times being disenfranchised, where those on the other side would say that it provides a clear-cut choice for voters and allows them to make the best decision more easily. On the issue of legitimacy, those opposing first past the post would point to the fact that candidates the vast majority of the time are not legitimate. This leads to tyranny of the minority and means that the vast majority of people who actually oppose a candidate are disproportionately not represented, and the smaller number of people who do support the candidate, often in the 30s and 40s of percentages, are represented. While those on the other side would say that the winner still has the most votes, and will again point to other benefits. The MP represents everyone, even if they don't necessarily agree with some of the policies of the voters who didn't vote for them. They will still do what's best in this argument for their constituency, and if you have to pick one person, it makes sense to pick the person with the largest proportion of support, even if it's not the majority, and often you will never result in a majority of people supporting one candidate, given the nature of politics. On the idea of the relationship between an MP and a constituent, those who oppose first past the post would say, what is the point of knowing the MP if you don't support them? Voters are disenfranchised and they don't like their MP in the majority of the cases, and as such, what's the point of it? They're probably going to ignore you. If all of your complaints are against Conservative policy and you're represented by a Conservative MP, it's very unlikely that you're actually going to get anywhere with said MP. However, those on the other side would say that this system provides a close relationship and allows voters to choose a person, not a party. And just creates, again, that link. You know who you go to, rather than having 5 representatives of your area who you wouldn't be sure who to pick. And this links on to the next idea of individuals or parties. Those who oppose this idea, oppose first past the post, would say that it's irrelevant whether you choose an individual or party, because most MPs are lobby fodder, meaning they're a tool of the party and just do as they're told regarding votes. And as such, it doesn't matter if the individual's amazing or rubbish, you're going to get the same result with them. Or those on the other side would say, MPs act to support their constituents and don't just randomly vote. They do what is best for their people, otherwise they probably wouldn't be elected, as far as this argument goes, and as such it's an important issue. And then finally, on the idea of smaller parties, those who oppose first past the post would say that it's bad for small parties, for ethnic parties, for specific issue parties. They will never get anywhere, and it reinforces the current system of 2 parties, which they say is bad, while those on the other side would say that it helps prevent extremist parties. They prefer catch-all parties, which are a broad church of ideas, and given that the party is going to be in government, it makes sense for them to be broad and have a wider appeal, rather than having lots of smaller parties trying to form a coalition. Overall, supporters of first past the post tend to support it for its general ability to produce strong governments and oppositions, and supporters will tend to come from the 2 big parties, where of course they benefit most from it, and they may come from somewhere like the SNP. Basically, anyone who benefits from this system is more likely to support it. However, most opponents will come from a smaller party who suffer under the system, such as the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party. What is clear, despite all these views, is that there won't be any reform for a long time. All one has to do is look at the failure of the AV referendum in 2011 or 2014, I'm not entirely sure, but look at that election and you'll see that people at the moment don't support electoral reform, and there isn't enough of a case. There's too many bigger issues going on for electoral reform to be considered an issue of this time. But ultimately though, what is your thought on first past the post? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Also, is there anything that I missed, got wrong, or could do better? Let me know on Twitter in the comments, and also let me know if there's anything else, topic you want to see. And be sure to check back on Friday for another episode. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you all soon.